There is a man who has sat at the center of the biggest technology revolution in human history. And, not once, have you seen him panic. While other CEOs scramble, post angry tweets, or crumble under pressure, Jensen Huang just smiles. And that smile is not performance. It is not PR training. It is the result of a very specific psychological architecture, one that took decades to build, and one that most people will never understand. By the end of this video, you will. But here's what's strange, and I want you to hold this thought until the very end of this video. The secret to Jensen Huang's unshakable calm was built entirely on failure. Jensen Huang is the co-founder and CEO of NVIDIA. In 2024, NVIDIA became one of the most valuable companies in the world, briefly surpassing Apple and Microsoft, driven by the global explosion of AI. Jensen didn't just build a chip company. He quietly built the infrastructure of the future. But what the headlines won't tell you is how he thinks. Because most people study what Jensen Huang built. Almost no one studies the mind that built it. That's what we're doing today. If you're new here, this channel is about understanding the psychology behind power, success, and human behavior at the highest levels. If that's interesting to you, subscribe. New videos drop every week and we go deep. Now, back to Jensen. Jensen Huang was born in Taiwan in 1963. At 9 years old, his parents sent him and his brother to live with relatives in the United States, a decision driven by opportunity, but also uncertainty. He ended up in Oneida Baptist Institute in Kentucky. A boarding school that was, by most accounts, rough. Jensen has described it as a place where survival instincts got sharpened early. This is not a small detail. Psychologists call it stress inoculation, the idea that early, manageable exposure to hardship builds resilience. The child who learns to navigate discomfort early develops a nervous system that doesn't collapse under pressure later. Jensen wasn't coddled. He was tested. And the mind adapted. This is chapter 1 of his psychological profile, a baseline relationship with difficulty that most people never develop. Where others see risk, Jensen's nervous system recognizes it as familiar territory. In 1993, Jensen Huang co-founded NVIDIA at a Denny's restaurant in San Jose. He was 30 years old. He had a vision, but no guarantee it would work. The early years of NVIDIA were brutal. The company nearly went bankrupt multiple times. Their first major product, the NV1 chip, was a commercial failure. Microsoft dropped support for it. Sega walked away from a deal. NVIDIA almost didn't survive. Most people don't know that story. They see the $3 trillion valuation and assume the path was clean. It wasn't. Here is the psychology that matters. Jensen didn't conflate the failure of a product with the failure of himself. This is a distinction that separates high performers from everyone else. Psychologically, it's called low-ego threat response to external failure, the ability to watch something you built fall apart without your identity falling apart with it. Most people can't do this. When their idea fails, they feel like they failed. The shame becomes paralyzing. Jensen's architecture was different. He processed failure as data, not as verdict. Here is something that rarely gets discussed. NVIDIA spent nearly a decade building hardware that most people didn't understand why they needed. GPUs, graphics processing units, were originally made for video games. Jensen believed they could do much more. He poured resources into CUDA, a software platform that allowed GPUs to be programmed for general computing, for years before it had a clear commercial payoff. That was a decade-long bet with no guaranteed outcome. The psychological concept here is future self-continuity, the ability to vividly imagine and care about the future version of yourself, and delay gratification for them. Research by psychologist Hal Hershfield shows that people with strong future self-continuity make dramatically better long-term decisions. They invest more. They sacrifice short-term comfort more easily. They plan rather than react. Jensen's calm comes, in part, from operating on a different time horizon than almost everyone around him. While competitors were optimizing for quarterly earnings, Jensen was playing a 20-year game. Calm is easy when you're not surprised by how long things take. Jensen Huang has 60 direct reports. 60. In conventional management theory, this is considered borderline insane. Most leadership textbooks recommend 6 to 8. But Jensen did it deliberately, and the reason reveals something profound about his psychology. He once said, "I have zero patience for, actually what I reject is this notion of need to know. I like as many people to know as much about what's happening in the company as possible." This is radical transparency as a psychological tool. When everyone knows what's happening, when there's no information hoarding, no political gatekeeping, people stop spending mental energy on internal politics. They focus on the work. But here's the deeper layer: this management style only works if the person at the top is psychologically secure. Leaders who control information do so because information is power, and they need power to feel safe. Jensen doesn't need that safety mechanism. He's not threatened by people knowing everything. He's not afraid of being challenged. That level of internal security is rare. It's the product of identity that isn't dependent on status, titles, or the perception of being the smartest person in the room. This one seems small. It isn't. Jensen Huang almost always wears a black leather jacket. At investor conferences, product launches, keynote stages, the jacket is there. This is not a fashion choice. It is an identity anchor. Psychologists have studied the effect of consistent personal symbols on mental stability. When you wear the same thing, when you operate within consistent rituals, you reduce decision fatigue and reinforce a stable sense of self. Steve Jobs had his black turtleneck. Mark Zuckerberg has his gray t-shirt. But Jensen's leather jacket carries something specific. It signals, "I don't need to dress for your approval." It is quiet psychological independence made visible. It starts in the mirror, with a man who knows exactly who he is before he walks into the room. So now, after all of this, let's return to the question. Why is Jensen Huang so calm? It is not because things have been easy. It is not because he's emotionally disconnected. It is not because he's performing for cameras. It is because of a very specific psychological stack built over 60 years. A childhood that trained him for discomfort. A relationship with failure that is informational, not identity-threatening. A time horizon so long that short-term turbulence barely registers. A management philosophy built on security, not control. An identity so stable it doesn't need external validation to stay upright. Jensen Huang is calm because nothing that is happening right now is as hard as what already happened, and he knows it. That is the psychology of the calm. The most dangerous thing in the world is a person who is no longer afraid of starting over. Jensen Huang has started over, and watched things collapse, enough times that the fear simply lost its grip. And when fear loses its grip, calm moves in. That's the real secret. If you found this breakdown valuable, subscribe, and drop in the comments, which part of Jensen's psychology surprised you the most? I'll see you in the next one.